Hey guys, tonight we are diving into surprisingly serene, almost boring, later years of a creature you probably thought only existed to be slain. The Minotaur. Imagine, if you will, soft Cretan breezes rustling through olive trees, the distant bleating of sheep, and the gentle lapping of waves against the shore. This is where we're heading, far from the clanging swords and panicked screams of legend. Tonight, we explore what happens after myth, when a monster just wants to put its hooves up and enjoy a quiet retirement. Don't worry, the action sequences are minimal, perhaps even non-existent. You probably won't survive the sheer lack of peril. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. It's always wild to see how far these sleepy stories travel. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin rather unceremoniously, as a bundle of confused limbs and lowing sounds in the grand, if slightly scandalized, palace of Knossos. Your birth isn't exactly the typical royal arrival, complete with heralds and fanfare. No, your debut is complicated. Let's just say your father, King Minos, may have promised he didn't quite keep to Poseidon, god of the sea, and apparently prime cattle suppliers. Minos was supposed to sacrifice a magnificent white bull gifted by the god, but honestly, the bull was just too nice. So Minos swapped it out. Poseidon, as you might expect, was not amused. The divine equivalent of a strongly worded email was sent, targeting Minos' wife, Queen Pasiphae. And well, you, my friend, are the result of that divine-level passive aggression combined with some seriously unfortunate architecture provided by Daedalus. You pop into existence, half human, half bull, right there in the heart of Minoan civilization. Talk about a dramatic entrance. Your earliest memories are a blur of large, startled faces, the smell of olive oil and beeswax, and a confusing echo of your own attempts at communication. A sort of half-bellow, half-cry. Life in the palace is awkward. Imagine being a toddler, but instead of scraping your knees, you're accidentally leaving hoofprints on expensive mosaic floors. Instead of asking for juice, you're letting out a low moo that shakes the tapestries. The servants try their best, bless them. Some are terrified. Others are just deeply, profoundly confused. Is it snack hay or grapes today, your majesty? You can almost hear them whisper. Pasiphae, your mother, tries to be a mother, but it's difficult. You're a living, breathing reminder of divine curse and a very public scandal. It's not exactly ideal for family bonding over breakfast. You mostly see the world from the level or lower, a jumble of flowing robes, sandal feet, and the occasional dropped piece of feta cheese you're not sure you're supposed to snuffle at. The palace itself is vast and complex, a sprawling collection of rooms, courtyards, and corridors. This is Knossos, after all, the center of the Bronze Age Minoan world. They were a fascinating people. The Minoans, known for their impressive palaces, their vibrant frescoes depicting dolphins and bull leaping. Yes, bull leaping, try not to take it personally, and their thalassocracy or sea power. They dominated the Aegean waves for centuries, their ships connecting Crete to distant lands like Egypt and the Levant, exchanging goods and ideas. Historians still argue whether the Minoan civilization was truly an empire or a network of independent city-states with Knossos as a cultural or religious center. It's a detail that probably didn't cross your mind as a young bull child, more concerned with whether you could reach that interesting-looking plant in the courtyard. Your size and strength develop quickly. What was once awkward becomes powerful. You don't mean to break things, but sometimes your enthusiasm, or just a clumsy turn, results in a shattered vase or a knocked-over column. It makes quiet playtime indoors a bit of challenge. Hide and seek is out of the question. You're not exactly subtle. Tag is also a bad idea for the other participants. You spend a lot of time in the palace gardens, perhaps where there's more space and fewer breakables. You might notice a sophisticated plumbing system the Minoans had, including flush toilets. A quirky tidbit for you. They had terracotta pipes and collected rainwater. So, while you might have been a unique plumbing challenge yourself, the palace infrastructure was surprisingly modern for its time. You probably need to worry about leaving a mess, at least on that front. Though the logistics of a bull-headed toddler in ancient sanitation are best left to the imagination. Life is confusing, feeling different from everyone around you. You're royalty, yes, but you're also other. The whispers follow you, the wary glances. It's less about being a monster at this stage and more about being an exceptionally large, hairy, four-legged oddity in a world of two-legged humans. You try to fit in, maybe imitate the human children you see from a distance, running and playing. But when you try to run, it's more of a lumbering gallop, and your attempts at playful headbutts are met with shrieks, not giggles. It's isolating. You don't understand why you're this way, why you elicit fear or confusion instead of affection. You just want to chew on a nice bit of grass and maybe get a good scratch behind the ears, like any other calf. Except you're not just any other calf. Are you? You're the problem Poseidon sent, growing bigger and more conspicuously not human by the day, right there in the center of the Minoan world. The palace, for all its grandeur and sophistication, starts to feel less like a home and more like a temporary holding pen for the inevitable next phase of your unusual existence. You're outgrowing your welcome, quite literally, and the whispers about finding a more suitable place for you begin to grow louder than the distant lowing of the royal herds. You see, those whispers about a suitable place aren't just idle palace gossip. As you grow from a confusing calf-human hybrid into a substantial, four-legged individual with impressive horns starting to bud, the practicalities of housing you become problematic. Palace life, for all its open courtyards and spacious rooms, wasn't designed for someone who needs extra wide doorways and tend to leave scuff marks that mere mortals find difficult to buff out. You navigate the polished gypsum floors, try and keep your balance. Those can be slippery, let me tell you. Imagine trying to walk gracefully when you're part bull. It's less graceful and more controlled lumbering. Going up or down stairs is a particular adventure. Minoan palace stairs are often wide and shallow, designed for processional ease, but they weren't built with the weight and hoof placement of a young minotaur in mind. Each step is a calculation, a test of balance, often accompanied by a soft clatter and the nervous glances of anyone nearby. Oh, dear! Is it going to take out that priceless fresco depicting? Is that a griffin playing hopscotch? Unlikely, but possible. Your strength is another learning curve. What feels like a gentle nudge to you can send a small table skittering across a room or unintentionally rearrange garden statuary. You learn to be careful, to move deliberately, which, let's be honest, doesn't exactly lend itself to spontaneous fun. Playing becomes a solitary activity, perhaps batting at a particularly sturdy olive tree or trying to catch butterflies, surprisingly futile exercise with hose. The palace is full of beautiful, delicate things. Pottery painted with swirling patterns, intricate gold jewelry worn by the courtiers, fine linens. You become acutely aware of the potential for accidental chaos that follows you like a personal dust cloud. Every turn requires thought. Is that urn ancient? Yes. Is it directly in my path? Also yes. Okay, slow down, pivot carefully. Crisis averted. Most of the time. Socially, things don't get easier. As you get bigger, the initial confusion among the palace staff solidifies into a quiet, background fear. They perform their duties, bringing your increasingly large meals, tidying areas you frequented, but they keep a respectful, or perhaps simply wary, distance. The royal family attempts different strategies. Minos, Ed the Pragmatist, likely sees you as a political or logistical problem that needs solving. Pasiphae, well, your relationship with her is complex. There's perhaps some residual maternal feeling mixed with deep embarrassment and the constant reminder of divine displeasure. She can't exactly trot you out for state dinners. Tutors are probably brought in at some point, attempts made to educate you, to teach you human ways. Imagine teaching the alphabet to someone whose primary vocalizations are variations of moo. It's probably a short-lived endeavor. All right, let's try again. No, that's just a low rumble. How about B? Still rumbling. Perhaps we could try shapes? This circle looks a bit like a nose, doesn't it? They likely give up and retreat, citing creative differences. You spend your days observing, learning through quiet watching. You see the rhythm of palace life, the priests performing rituals, the artisans at work. You might see evidence of Minoan religious practices, which were quite unique. They didn't build huge temples like the Egyptians or Mesopotamians. Instead, they had peaked sanctuaries on mountains and sacred caves, and performed rituals in palace courtyards or dedicated rooms. Bull imagery is everywhere, deeply symbolic, often associated with power or divinity, an ironic detail given your own existence. You are a living, breathing, slightly awkward embodiment of their powerful religious symbols, yet you are kept hidden away. Historians still argue whether Minoan religion was centered around a primary goddess figure or a pantheon of deities. It's a fascinating question about a culture that left behind no written religious texts, only evocative art and architectural clues. You might notice the types of goods being moved around the palace. Large pithoid jars used for storing olive oil or wine, stacks of pottery, perhaps bundles of textiles dyed vibrant colors using natural pigments. The Minoans were skilled dyers. A quirky tidbit about their diet. Archaeological finds suggest they ate a lot of pulses like lentils and chickpeas, alongside figs, grapes, and wheat, in addition to livestock. So your menu wasn't just grass. You likely had access to a surprisingly varied, healthy diet. Perhaps you developed a taste for figs? Or found chickpeas amusingly roll-y. These are the mundane details of your unusual childhood. While heroes are off having dramatic adventures involving monsters and quests, you're navigating the tricky social and physical landscape of being a bull-headed royal who really wants to scratch an itch on their back but can't quite reach. The gilded cage, for all its luxury, feels increasingly like just a cage. You sense the decision looming, the one that will remove you from this place where you don't quite belong. It's not malice, not really. More like logistical necessity mixed with a healthy dose of denial about how you came to be. You're too big, too strong, too different to be kept in the main residence anymore. The whispers turn into more concrete plans. Architects are consulted. Ground is surveyed. The air in the palace shifts, becoming charged with a sense of anticipation, not for a festival or a visiting dignitary, but for your departure. You don't know where you're going, but you know it's away from the familiar, awkward comfort of the only home you've ever known. And while the legends focus on what came into your next home, for you, the focus is entirely on leaving this one behind. The growing pains weren't just physical. They were the slow, dull ache of realizing you needed a dwelling built specifically to contain you. That sense of anticipation, that feeling of an impending move, soon takes on a more concrete shape. You start hearing a name mentioned more frequently around the palace corridors, spoken with reverence and perhaps a touch of apprehension. Daedalus. Ah, yes, Daedalus. The original Renaissance man. Centuries before the Renaissance was even a glimmer in Italy's eye. He was the most celebrated craftsman, inventor, and architect of his time, a true genius with bronze, wood, and stone. He could build anything, fix anything, and apparently design anything, including, as it turns out, a rather elaborate solution to your specific housing needs. He was, by all accounts, incredibly clever, capable of building things that seemed almost magical. A bit like a Bob the Builder and Q from James Bond rolled into one, but with more mythological baggage. Daedalus was already in Minos's service, having perhaps arrived from Athens under slightly cloudy circumstances involving a jealous nephew and a rather unfortunate tumble from a temple rooftop. Genius often comes with drama, you see. Minos, needing a discreet and highly secure place for his. Well, for you, turn to the best in the business. The brief was simple in concept if not execution. Build a structure so complex, so convoluted, that anything placed inside could not possibly find its way out. A place where you could live, presumably out of sight and out of mind for the more image-conscious members of the court. It needed to be robust, permanent, and utterly baffling to navigate. Think of it as the ultimate in high-security containment Minoan edition. No expense was spared, naturally. When you're dealing with divine curses and unique offspring, you go for the premium package. You couldn't see the construction directly from your sequestered part of the palace, but you could hear it. The rhythmic tap-tap-tap of chisels shaping stone, the grating sound of heavy blocks being dragged into place, the distant shouts of foremen directing laborers. It was a constant, low hum beneath the usual palace sounds. Teams of workers were brought in, quarrying stone from nearby hillsides, shaping it, and assembling this colossal puzzle piece by piece. Daedalus himself would have overseen everything, his brilliant mind meticulously planning each turn, each dead end, each deceptively similar corridor. He wasn't just building walls. He was building confusion, engineering disorientation on a massive scale. One misplaced stone, one slightly different junction, and the whole intricate design could be compromised. No pressure, right? The Minoans were already excellent builders. Their palaces, like Knossos, are marvels of Bronze Age engineering, featuring multi-story sections, advanced drainage systems, and innovative structural techniques. A quirky tidbit about their architecture: they often used timber frames within stone walls, a technique that provided flexibility, especially useful in an earthquake-prone region. This hybrid approach might well have been incorporated into the labyrinth, making its walls not just sturdy, but potentially resilient, built to last. Daedalus would have combined his own Athenian knowledge with the sophisticated techniques already present on Crete. Imagine him there, perhaps poring over clay tablets, sketching out labyrinthine patterns, muttering about recursive algorithms and pathfinding difficulties. No. If we put a turn here, they'll just use the left-hand rule. Need more loops. And maybe a false exit, leading straight back to the beginning. Classic. The sheer scale of the project must have been immense. Building something this vast and complicated requires a huge amount of resources and coordination. It wasn't just a simple maze in a garden. It was an underground or partially underground structure, consuming a significant chunk of land near the palace. Historians still argue whether the myth of the labyrinth was inspired by the complex, multi-room layout of the Knossos palace itself, or if it refers to a distinct physical structure built elsewhere. Was a labyrinth just Minoan shorthand for a really confusing building? Or was there an actual purpose-built maze? Given your eventual relocation, the latter seems more likely, though perhaps the palace's complexity was good practice for Daedalus. It's hard to imagine Minos commissioning something less than utterly escape-proof for you. As the construction continues, the sounds get closer. Perhaps you might feel faint vibrations through the ground. It's a strange sensation knowing that this massive undertaking is specifically for you. Not a temple to honor the gods, not a new wing for the palace, but a custom-built giant playpen of confusion. It's less a home and more a designated area. The irony likely isn't lost on a more thoughtful palace residents, seeing this incredible feat of engineering dedicated to housing the result of a king's broken promise. Daedalus in the myths is also known for building wings so he and his son Icarus could escape Crete, a testament to his ingenious, if sometimes reckless, nature. He builds your prison, and then later builds the means of his own flight from it. A man of complex solutions, our Daedalus. For now, though, his focus is solely on creating the perfect maze, the walls rising stone by stone, anticipating the day you'll be moved into its silent, twisting embrace. The sounds of building slowly fade as the structure reaches completion, becoming a brooding, silent presence on the landscape, waiting for its sole, unusual occupant. The sounds of construction eventually cease, leaving a new silence in their wake. The air feels different, heavier, with the knowledge that your new home is complete, a monumental structure dedicated entirely to your containment. The day arrives when you are finally moved. It's not a grand procession. Certainly no cheering crowds line the route. More likely, it's a quiet, perhaps tense affair, involving careful handling and a route designed to be as discreet as possible from the palace grounds to the entrance of this brand new, confusing crib. You are guided, perhaps, or coaxed, or simply herded toward a large, imposing opening in the ground or hillside, an entrance that looks less like a front door and more like the maw of something vast and silent. Stepping inside is like entering a different world. The air immediately cools, carrying the damp, earthy smell of freshly cut and placed stone. Sunlight, which you took for granted in the open courtyards of Knossos, is scarce here. Long, echoing corridors stretch ahead, branching off in identical directions. The sheer scale is immediate and overwhelming. You are no longer just in a building. You are part of one, swallowed by its deliberate complexity. Every turn looks the same as the last. Every junction offers the same bewildering choice. Right? left, straight ahead, it all melts into a dizzying sameness. It's like stepping into an Escher drawing, but made of cold, hard rock and a distinct lack of witty paradoxes. Just relentless, repetitive pathways. Okay, pretty sure I passed that slightly stained stone block earlier, or was it one just like it? This is worse than trying to find your car in a multi-story parking garage during the holidays. This is a labyrinth. Your new address. Daedalus wasn't kidding. He built a place that defies spatial reasoning, a place designed to make you lose your bearings the moment you step inside. There are no windows offering glimpses of the outside world, no changing views to orient yourself by. Just stone, stone, and more stone, stretching in every direction. The only sound of those you make yourself, the clip-clop of your hooves on the floor, your own breathing, a sigh of frustration that echoes strangely down the corridors. You try exploring naturally. You follow a passage, take a turn, then another, only to find yourself back where you started, or perhaps in a part of the maze that looks identical to where you started, but as you eventually realize with a growing sense of despair, completely different. It's like a cosmic joke, but you're the only one on it, and you don't get the punchline. Developing a routine in such a place is challenging, but necessity is the mother of invention. Even for a creature of myth, food has to arrive somehow. Perhaps there are shafts from above, or a cleverly designed entry point that only staff with precise knowledge can navigate, dropping sustenance into a designated area before quickly retreating. You learn to listen for sounds associated with meal times, a rattle from above, the scrape of a hidden door. You learn to recognize the scent of your food within the otherwise constant smell of stone. Finding a place to rest becomes about trial and error. Some corners might be too damp, some pathways too exposed. You eventually find a spot that feels relatively secure, perhaps a wider chamber or a dead-end alcove, where you can lie down without feeling like you're blocking a potential, though unlikely, route. The labyrinth, in a way, becomes its own world, governed by its internal logic or lack thereof. It's a world of limited light, perhaps just faint rays filtering down from occasional vents or light wells that reach into the deeper sections, casting long, dancing shadows that only add to the confusion. The cool, constant temperature is one thing. The feeling of perpetual enclosure is another. It's a masterclass in disorientation. Historians still argue whether the labyrinth was primarily above ground, partially subterranean, or entirely underground. Its exact nature and scale remain subjects of debate, but from your perspective inside, it feels vast and undeniably confusing, regardless of its elevation. Ancient cultures were often fascinated by complex structures, both real and symbolic. A quirky tidbit: labyrinth designs weren't just architectural. They appeared on Minoan coins and pottery, suggesting they held a cultural or perhaps even religious significance beyond just the practical function of containment. You start to learn the maze not by sight, but by feel, by subtle shifts in the air currents, if any exist, by the different textures of the stone under your hooves, though they all seem pretty similar, or perhaps by some internal sense of direction that battles against the labyrinth's design. You discover which paths loop back quickest, which ones can go on forever before hitting a wall. It's a slow, frustrating process of mapping your immediate environment through repeated, often unsuccessful, exploration. You're not just living in a labyrinth. You're constantly experiencing its defining characteristic, its ability to make you lost. It's like living in a giant stone jigsaw puzzle that constantly shuffles itself just to annoy you. Great. Hit another wall. Pretty sure this is the third time I've been here today. Or is it Tuesday? Despite its purpose and your isolation within it, the labyrinth becomes your reality. You settle in, not with comfort, but with a grudging acceptance of its baffling nature, beginning the strange, repetitive rhythm of life within its twisting, inescapable walls. Settling into the labyrinth is less about making a home and more about simply existing within its confines. The initial confusion and frustration of getting lost slowly give way to a dull acceptance of the repetitive nature of your surroundings. Without the cycle of sun and moon visible, time becomes a fluid, often meaningless concept. Days bleed into one another, marked only by the rare occurrences that break the monotony. Primarily, the delivery of food. You learn to listen for the subtle cues, the faint sound that signal nourishment is on its way, a brief interaction with the outside world through a slot or a dropping tube. This becomes the central event of your day, the anchor in a sea of sameness. Your routine, if you can call it that, is simple. You wake, though whether it's morning or evening is anyone's guess, in your chosen resting spot. Perhaps stretch your bull limbs and then wait. You might wander the immediate passages, a short circuit you've mapped through sheer repetition, just to move your body. Exploration further afield becomes less appealing, as the certainty of getting lost outweighs the slim possibility of finding anything new or interesting. Every corridor is a variation on a theme. Every corner leads to another identical corner. It's the ultimate in minimalist design, if your goal is sensory deprivation chic. Oh, look, another gray wall. And it's next to, wait for it, another gray wall. Exciting stuff. The labyrinth is profoundly quiet. The stone walls absorb sound, and you are its only permanent inhabitant. Your own footsteps, your breathing, the occasional low sigh, these are the dominant sounds. The silence can be heavy, pressing in on you. You might try making different noises, just to hear the echo, to feel the space around you respond. A low move sends a wave of sound bouncing off the walls, a momentary disruption before the silence rushes back in. It's a constant reminder of your isolation, broken only by those brief, transactional moments of food delivery. It's less like living in a house and more like being stored in a really, really complicated, echoey basement. Passing the hours is a challenge. You can't read, you have no one to talk to, and the scenery never changes. You might watch dust motes dance in the rare shafts of light that penetrate the depths, or examine the patterns in stone, if you can find any. Grooming becomes a significant activity, meticulously cleaning your hide and horns. Perhaps you engage in some internal monologue, reviewing past, more interesting times, like the sheer panic you caused accidentally knocking over that fruit stand in the palace gardens. You might try to recall the scent of the outside world, the salt spray from the sea, the perfume of flowers, the cooking smells from the palace kitchens. These memories are perhaps the only splashes of color in your otherwise monochrome existence. It's a quiet, repetitive existence that could drive a less stoic individual completely mad. You, however, possess a certain bull-headed patience. This kind of repetitive, isolated existence is about as far removed from typical ancient life as you can get. Most people in ancient Crete, like in many ancient societies, lived lives deeply connected to agricultural cycles, communal activities, and religious festivals. Their days were dictated by the sun, the seasons, the demands of farming or craft. A mainstream historical fact. Daily life for many Minoans would have revolved around production and storage of staple goods like grain, olives, and grapes. Palaces like Knossos also function as economic centers, warehousing vast quantities of these goods in those large pithoi jars you saw earlier. Your life, devoid of these rhythms, is an anomaly, a static existence outside the flow of time and community. You might wonder about how others in the ancient world passed their time when not working. They certainly didn't have streaming services. A quirky tidbit. Ancient Greeks enjoyed board games, dice games, and various athletic contests. Minoans might have had their own versions of these, perhaps even games based on labyrinth patterns, though probably not inside the labyrinth itself. You, meanwhile, are limited to the passive entertainment of watching the dust settle. It's not exactly stimulating. Historians still argue whether vast, complex structures like the labyrinth served purely practical purposes or held deeper symbolic or ritualistic meaning within Minoan society. Was your prison just a prison, or did it represent something else entirely? From your perspective, it feels pretty definitively like just a prison, albeit one designed with an excessive number of corridors. The sheer pointlessness of so much unoccupied space is almost comedic. All these twists and turns, and nowhere interesting to go. The glamorous life of a mythological creature. Life within the labyrinth settles into its unchanging rhythm, a quiet existence defined by stone walls and predictable arrival of food. You become accustomed to the silence, the lack of stimulation, the endless sameness of the corridors. You know your patch, or at least the paths you bother to learn, and the rest is just a blur of potential dead ends. Nothing much happens, and that's precisely the point. It's designed to be uneventful for you, save for your basic needs being met. Then, subtly, things change. You might sense at first through vibrations carried through the stone floor, a faint tremor different from the occasional earth tremor common to Crete, or perhaps a shift in the air pressure, a different echo carried on a non-existent breeze from the direction of the entrance. Distant sounds that are not your own movements begin to intrude on the silence. Faint shouts, the creak of wood, the murmur of human voices. These are unfamiliar sounds within your world. Signals that the outside is interacting with the inside in a way that doesn't involve dropping food. It's a ripple in the quiet pool of your existence. Ah, yes, the tribute ship must have arrived. This is a known pattern, an infrequent disruption. The legends say it was a consequence of a war between Crete and Athens, a punishment for Athens' defeat and the death of Minos' son, Androgeos, who was killed in Attica. The Athenians were forced to send a tribute, conventionally cited as 7 young men and 7 young women, every few years, to be offered to you, the Minotaur. From your perspective, you don't dwell on the political backstory. You just know that sometimes, at irregular intervals, new sounds and new presences appear in the outer parts of the labyrinth. It's like a subscription service you can sign up for, delivering, well, eventually more food, but the delivery process is less convenient than the usual chutes. You hear them enter. Footsteps, lighter and quicker than the heavy tread of the palace guards who sometimes oversaw your transfers. Voices, hushed and fearful, or perhaps try to sound brave. They would be guided into the entrance, the heavy door sealing behind them, trapping them within the maze's embrace. You can sense their confusion, their fear, echoing through the stone. They wander, trying to find their way, their movements initially tentative, then perhaps more desperate as the reality of their situation sinks in. It's a stark contrast to your own plodding, accustomed presence. They are chaos and noise entering your domain of predictable quiet. For you, this arrival is less about terror and more about disturbance. Your routine is interrupted. The maze is no longer just your solitary, boring habitat. It's now shared space, temporarily. It's like having unexpected house guests show up without calling. And they're also incredibly bad at navigating your hallways. You can track their progress or lack thereof through the echoing sounds. They move in starts and stops, their voices rising in panic or frustration. You, meanwhile, continue your low-key existence. You might move towards the sounds out of curiosity, or simply wait for them to blunder into your general vicinity. You're not actively hunting in a dramatic, cinematic way. You're just there. The labyrinth itself does most of the work of confusing and containing them. Yep, sounds like they've hit that triple dead end again. Classic. Took me ages to figure that bit out. And I live here. The sensory landscape changes too. The air, usually stagnant or carrying only the scent of stone and yourself, now carries the smells of other humans. Sweat, fear, perhaps the salt of the sea from their voyage. It's a jolt to your senses, a reminder of the world outside. A mainstream historical fact. Tribute was a common feature of power dynamics between city-states and empires in the ancient world, signifying submission and often providing resources or manpower to the dominant power. Athens paying tribute to Crete, if historically accurate in some form, fits into this broader pattern of ancient power structures. Life on board an ancient ship delivering tribute would have been basic, to say the least. A quirky tidbit about ancient seafaring. Ships like the trireme, though primarily warships, could transport people, but conditions were cramped and voyages would depend on weather. The journey from Athens to Crete would have taken several days, a miserable experience even without the knowledge of your grim destination. So these arrivals aren't exactly stepping off a luxury cruise liner. They're probably tired, seasick, and now utterly lost. Historians still argue whether the Athenian tribute was a literal sacrifice to a monster or a mythologized account of something else entirely, perhaps a harsh tax or forced labor. The truth, like the labyrinth's layout, is probably more complex than the simple story. But for you, in the moment, it's just new people in the house. And they're making a lot of noise while trying to find the non-existent exit. It's a temporary break from the relentless boredom, a brief, unsettling interlude before the quiet returns. With the new visitors inside, the labyrinth takes on a different atmosphere. It's no longer just your echoing domain. It's now populated, albeit sparsely and temporarily, by frightened, lost humans. You can sense their presence more acutely now. The air carries their scent, a mix of salt from the sea voyage, damp clothes, and that unmistakable tang of fear. Their movements, though often random and inefficient within the maze's layout, create new sound patterns that travel to the stone. Hurried footsteps, startled gasps, whispered, urgent conversations that abruptly cut off. You navigate by these new signals, moving to familiar darkness, guided less by sight and more by smell and sound. It's like the labyrinth has sprouted nervous little audio-visual cues. The encounters, when they happen, are rarely the dramatic, drawn-out chases depicted in later stories. The labyrinth does most of the work of bringing them to you, or bringing you to them. You might round a corner and simply find a group huddled together, utterly lost, their eyes wide with terror as they see you. Or perhaps you hear frantic movement nearby and simply wait, knowing the maze's turns will likely bring them stumbling into your path eventually. It's less fierce predator hunts prey and more awkward collision in a badly lit hallway. You don't need to strategize. The building itself is your unwitting accomplice. Oh, hello there. Didn't expect to see you all here. Lost, are we? Happens. From your perspective, these encounters are functional. These individuals represent the infrequent, inconvenient delivery of protein. It's not about malice or pleasure. It's about sustenance, a biological drive layered on top of the confusion and disruption their presence causes. The fear they radiate is palpable, almost a taste in the air, but it doesn't necessarily register as a complex emotion for you. It's just part of the package. Your interactions are brief, direct, and driven by instinct. There's no villainous monologue, no dramatic taunting. Just presence, confusion, and then necessity. The labyrinth, in its relentless complexity, has delivered the next meal in you, a creature of instinct and your unique biology. Simply fulfill your role. The maze contains them, and you are the reason for containment. The process is messy, unavoidable given your physical form and purpose. But within the context of your isolated existence, it's just another event. It's a disruption to your routine, the presence of foreign bodies in your space, that is perhaps more significant than the brief, violent conclusion of their journey. You return to your solitary wanderings or your resting spot, and the silence slowly begins to creep back in, absorbing the sounds of struggle and fear. The labyrinth, indifferent and unchanging, resumes its quiet watch. It's a grim cycle, yes, but from your standpoint, it's less mythological horror and more scheduled inconvenience. Well, that's that. Wonder if they brought snacks? Probably not. In ancient times, the relationship between humans and animals, especially powerful or unusual ones, was complex, often involving religious rituals or sacrifices. A mainstream historical fact. Animal sacrifice was a common practice in many ancient religions, including those in Greece and the Near East, used to appease deities, seek favor, or mark significant events. While your situation is unique, the concept of dedicating living beings or parts of them to higher powers or significant entities was not entirely alien to the ancient mindset, even if your case was wrapped in myth and punishment. Thinking about ancient diets might offer a different perspective. Meat was not as common in the daily diet for the average person as it might be in some modern cultures. It was often reserved for special occasions or associated with sacrifices. A quirky tidbit. Protein sources for most ancient Greeks would have relied more heavily on fish, legumes, and dairy products than on large quantities of red meat. So, while your situation is extreme, the idea of meat being a significant, albeit infrequent, part of the diet aligns, in a twisted way, with ancient realities. Historians still argue whether the myths of human sacrifice to the Minotaur have any basis in historical reality, or they are purely symbolic or allegorical representations of Cretan dominance over Athens. Was it literal tribute, or a story to explain Athenian subjugation? The debate continues, lost in the mists of time and myth. But for you, inside the labyrinth, the encounters, however brief and unsettling, were undeniably real, a grim punctuation mark in the boring sentence of your existence, facilitated entirely by the clever, confusing walls of your home. The rhythm of life inside the labyrinth continues, punctuated occasionally by the arrival of the tribute. You've grown accustomed to pattern, sounds and new arrivals, The familiar scent of fear, their bewildered wanderings, the brief, necessary encounter, and then the return to silence. It's not stimulating, but it's predictable. You've settled into this strange, underground existence, a monotonous routine within a twisting stone. But the next arrival of the tribute feels different. Almost immediately, you sense a different energy. The footsteps aren't quite as randomly panicked. The voices, though still hushed, carry a different tone. Less raw terror, more determination. And there's a scent, one individual scent, that is stronger, more purposeful than the others. Something is different about this group. They aren't getting lost in the usual, immediate ways. They seem to be navigating with an unnatural efficiency, moving deeper into the maze with discernible, though still confusing, path. It's like they brought a GPS, which frankly is against the rules of labyrinth dwelling. Seriously? Someone brought a map? Or did Daedalus leave breadcrumbs this time? Highly unprofessional. You track their progress with a mixture of curiosity and mild annoyance. This isn't how it usually goes. They aren't stumbling blindly into your general vicinity. They seem to be coming towards you. However, indirectly, the maze forces them to travel. This individual with a purposeful scent is guiding them, a disruptive force entering your quiet world. This, you sense, is the famed hero Theseus, the Athenian prince. The legends about him portray a mighty warrior, a slayer of monsters, a founder hero of Athens. A mainstream historical fact about Athens. During this Bronze Age period, Athens was a significant Mycenaean center, later emerging as a powerful city-state that would become renowned for its democracy and cultural achievements centuries later. Theseus is tied to its mythical foundation and early strength. Your encounter with Theseus is not the prolonged, dramatic battle of later myths. The labyrinth doesn't allow for grand, open combat sequences. Instead, it's likely a more sudden, perhaps awkward confrontation in a confined space. You might turn a corner and find him there, not cowering, but ready. Perhaps the fight is a brief, intense struggle, surprising in its brevity. He's agile, quick, using tools you're not accustomed to encountering in your visitors. There's a glint of bronze, the feel of something sharp, a quick, targeted action rather than a prolonged wrestling match. This isn't a typical tribute interaction. This is something new, something focused. A quirky tidbit about ancient combat. Bronze Age warriors used weapons like swords, spears, and axes, and defensive gear included shields and helmets. Combat was often close quarters and brutal, focused on disabling opponents quickly. Theseus would have been trained in the Athenian fighting style of his era, whatever exactly that entailed. You feel the impact, the shock of the unexpected. It's disruptive, painful, a stark deviation from the passive role the maze usually forces upon those who enter. But crucially, in this version of the story, the encounter doesn't end in your demise. You survive. Perhaps the blow isn't fatal, or perhaps you're simply injured, disoriented, or the labyrinth's confusing nature allows for a disengagement. Theseus, having accomplished his goal, whether that was strictly killing you or simply stopping the tribute, depending on the nuance of myth, then needs to find his way out. And that's where the other difference lies. You sense their exit, a steady, backtracking movement, guided by something you can't see. The thread, perhaps Ariadne's clever gift, allowing them to unravel their path through the maze. It's incredibly irritating. You didn't have a thread when you moved in. The labyrinth is silent again, but it's a different silence than before. It's no longer just your quiet home. It's a space that has been breached, navigated, and most importantly, escaped by someone other than you. The encounter with Theseus, brief as it might have been, is a shock to your system, physically and existentially. You are injured, yes, but more than that, the fundamental nature of your existence here has been challenged. The inescapable prison was, it turns out, escapable, at least with the right help. This makes the labyrinth less of a secure home and more of a compromised structure. It no longer serves its primary purpose of absolute containment, at least not against someone clever enough. Historians still argue whether Theseus was a real historical figure whose deeds were later embellished with myth, or purely a legendary hero embodying Athenian ideals. Regardless, his impact on your life, such as it was undeniably real. The encounter leaves you not defeated, but unsettled. The labyrinth, your world, feels different. Less secure, less permanent. The possibility of further intrusions, further disruptions, now seems real. The quiet monotony, once a source of dull acceptance, now feels vulnerable. You lie injured, perhaps, in the silence, and the idea forms, this isn't working anymore. This isn't a safe, quiet place to exist. The encounter with a hero, intended perhaps to end your life, instead triggers a different kind of change. It makes you realize that staying here, waiting for the next hero with a sharper weapon or a better map, isn't a peaceful retirement plan. It's just waiting for another, potentially less fortunate, encounter. The labyrinth is no longer your inevitable destiny. It's a place you need to leave. The silence that descends after the encounter with Theseus is profound, broken only by your own heavy breathing and perhaps the faint ache of your injuries. The labyrinth feels different now. Its previously absolute containment proven fallible. The encounter, though relatively brief compared to its mythical retelling, leaves a lasting impression. It's more than just physical discomfort. It's the psychological shock of being confronted so directly, so capably, within the space designed specifically to prevent such confrontations. You survived, yes, a twist the legends often skip over, but survival doesn't immediately feel like victory. It feels like a complication. Lying there in the quiet, the damp stone cool against your skin, you process the event. The maze, your inescapable home, has been navigated, infiltrated, and escaped by someone else. This wasn't just another delivery. It was a challenge, a disruption that fundamentally changed your relationship with your environment. The labyrinth no longer feels like a permanent, secure place to exist. It feels like a place where people who are good with string and pointy objects might just show up again. And frankly, you're tired of it. The monotonous life wasn't great, but at least it was predictable. This new uncertainty isn't conducive to a quiet life. The idea, initially perhaps a fleeting thought, solidifies into a quiet resolve. You need to leave. The labyrinth, designed to prevent escape, now presents a different kind of challenge. Using your extensive, albeit frustrating, knowledge of its layout to find the exit. You've spent years wandering these halls, hitting dead ends, getting turned around. You haven't mapped it in a systematic way like Daedalus or Theseus with his thread, but you know its character. You know which corridors tend to loop back quickly, which junctions are red herrings. It's less about following a logical path and more about feeling your way through a familiar, confusing space. It's the ultimate test of your boring, repetitive residency. Can you use the soul-crushing monotony to your advantage? Okay, that left turn always leads back to that damn patch. Right. So, probably not that way. What about, yes, the wall that smells faintly of despair? Also a dead end. Right. Elimination process it is. Working your way toward the entrance is a slow, deliberate process. You move cautiously, relying on instinct and the faint echoes of your past wanderings. The maze still tries to trick you, of course. Its purpose is baked into its stone heart, but you persist, driven by the simple desire to be out. You follow what feels like a gradual gradient towards fresher air, towards a faint, almost imperceptible scent of the outside world. It takes time, perhaps hours, maybe even a full cycle of the sun you can't see. But eventually, you see it. Not a sudden flood of light, but a gradual increase in brightness ahead, a patch of gray becoming lighter, then white. The air grows cooler, carrying the distinct, wonderful smell of earth and living things. Stepping out of the labyrinth is a shock to the senses. The sheer openness of the world outside is disorienting after years of confinement. The sky is vast, overwhelming. The air is filled with 1,000 different smells. Flowers, trees, distant animals, the ever-present scent of sea. The sounds are louder, more varied. Birdsong, the rustle of leaves, the hum of insects. It's a cacophony after the labyrinth's silence. The sunlight, even if muted by clouds, feels intense, requiring your eyes to adjust. You stand there, perhaps blinking, feeling exposed and vulnerable without the stone walls around you. It's like stepping out a long, dark tunnel into a blindingly bright day, except the tunnel was your entire adult life. And then the large reality sets in. You are outside. You survived the labyrinth, survived the hero, But now what? Your existence was defined by being in the labyrinth, the creature contained within the maze. Without the maze, who are you? Where do you go? You're a creature myth, but myths usually end with the monster being slain, not standing around awkwardly blinking in the sunlight. It's an identity crisis of epic, or perhaps profoundly unepic proportions. You don't have a resume. Your only job experience is inhabiting a confusing stone structure, occasional recipient of tribute. The ancient Greeks had strong beliefs about fate and destiny, often believing their lives were subject to the will of the gods. Your unexpected survival and exit defy this, leaving you adrift from your predetermined narrative. Historians still argue whether the labyrinth was filled in or destroyed after the myth, or if it simply fell into ruin over time. Its precise fate lost to history. Its emptiness, however it came about, mirrors your own feeling of having an empty space where your defining purpose used to be. Finding your way around the outside world is proven to be almost as confusing as the maze itself, just with more trees and fewer convenient walls to bump into. Okay, so if that hill is north, wait, which way is north? Is there a thread for the whole island? You are free, but utterly without direction, standing on the cusp of a retirement plan you never knew you needed. Standing there outside the labyrinth, blinking in the Cretan sun, the feeling of being adrift slowly gives way to a more practical assessment of your situation. You're out. You survived. Great. Now what? Crete, the only place you've ever known, suddenly feels complicated. Every corner of the island, every distant view of the palace, is tied up with the awkwardness of your birth, the isolation of your childhood, the monotony of the maze, and that rather pointed encounter with the Athenian hero. It's a small island, and frankly, you're a hard creature miss, even if you're trying to keep a low profile. Wandering around the Cretan countryside as a bull-headed humanoid who used to live in the big maze seems like a recipe for causing precisely the kind of panic and disruption you'd rather avoid. People tend to overreact. Oh, look, it's the half-bull guy from the labyrinth. Didn't he get, dealt with? Is he coming this way? Run. Yeah, not exactly the foundation for a peaceful post-labyrinth life. No, Crete is clearly not the place for your quiet, hopefully boring retirement. Too much history. Too many potential encounters with heroes looking for follow-up quests or locals who remember you from the awkward phase. The logical conclusion is clear, and perhaps a little daunting. You need to leave the island altogether. This isn't a dramatic escape fueled by vengeance or a new heroic quest. It's a purely practical decision, born of a desire for anonymity and peace. You just want to find somewhere quiet, somewhere far away from palace intrigue and hero-slaying antics, somewhere you can just exist. Leaving an island means travel by sea, and this presents its own set of challenges. You're not exactly a standard passenger. You can't waltz down to the Minoan harbor, purchase a ticket, and blend in with the merchants and travelers heading to the mainland. One ticket to, say, Rhodes, please. Yes, for the large, bull-headed gentleman. Does he get frequent flyer points? Unlikely. You'd cause a riot, attract unwanted attention, and probably sink any smaller vessel. You need a different approach. You need discreet, probably solitary, passage. You might make your way cautiously towards a less populated stretch of the coast, perhaps observing the sea traffic from a hidden vantage point. Crete was a major maritime power during the Bronze Age, its ships plying trade routes across the Aegean, connected to mainland Greece, the islands, and even further afield. A mainstream historical fact. The Minoans were renowned seafarers, their control of the seas contributing significantly to their wealth and influence. Their ships, depicted in frescoes and models, were sturdy vessels, capable of carrying goods and people across considerable distances. From your hidden spot, you could observe the different types of boats, not just the grand ships, but perhaps smaller fishing vessels or trading ships that might hug the coastline. You'd need something reasonably sturdy, large enough to carry you without capsizing, and ideally, something you could board without arousing suspicion, perhaps under cover of darkness. Finding such a vessel and a way onto it requires patience and careful observation. It's less about brute force and more about logistical problem solving. Okay, that ship looks big enough, but it's docked right near the guards. That smaller one, maybe, but looks a bit flimsy. Needs something just right, like Goldilocks, but with more horns and fewer portage-related complaints. There are different types of ancient boats beyond the famous triremes of later periods. A quirky tidbit: Bronze Age Aegean boats included rounder, cargo-focused vessels alongside the longer, oared ships potentially used for war or faster travel. You'd be looking for something closer to the cargo type, prioritizing stability over speed, and your navigation skills would be limited to coastline features once you set sail. A mainstream historical fact: ancient mariners often relied on coastal landmarks, the position of the sun and stars, and knowledge of currents and winds for navigation, especially on longer voyages across open water. You, lacking a compass or celestial charts, would likely stick to what you could see, aiming for a distant shoreline. Historians still argue whether Minoan ships engaged in direct trade with distant lands like Egypt, or if goods were passed through intermediary ports, adding layers of complexity of their maritime network. Either way, the sea was their highway, and now it needed to be yours too. Planning your quiet exit is a far cry from your life as a mythical monster. It's the mundane, stressful reality of trying to relocate when you have very specific, non-standard travel requirements. It's less beast escapes and more logistical nightmare seeks quiet passage. Leaving Crete isn't easy, even if you're determined. The stealth required for a creature of your dimensions is considerable, but necessity is a powerful motivator, and the memory of that unsettling encounter and the compromised labyrinth spurs you on. Perhaps you waited for a moonless night, observed the rhythms of the harbor or secluded cove, and chose your moment. Slipping onto a cargo vessel, maybe one carrying goods to some less prominent port, would be the most likely scenario. It's not glamorous. It's probably cold, damp, and involve hiding amongst crates or bundles of trade goods, hoping the crew doesn't perform a thorough inventory check before setting sail. Just me, crammed in here with smells like dried fish and disappointment. Lovely. Being at sea for the first time, or at least the first time not being intentionally transported somewhere against your will, is an experience. The gentle, or perhaps violent, rocking of the boat is unsettling after the absolute stillness of the labyrinth. The world is suddenly vast and wet. Above is the endless sky. Below is the equally endless, dark sea. The smell of salt is everywhere, clinging to the air, the wood, your hide. If the seas are calm, it might be merely monotonous. If they are rough, it is terrifying and chaotic, unpredictable motion unlike the solid, unchanging stone you're used to. Seasickness, it turns out, is not limited by mythological status. The journey takes time. Days, perhaps, marked only by the rising and setting of the sun, finally visible again, and the changes in the sea's mood. You remain hidden, a stowaway of legendary proportions. You see distant coastlines, islands passing by, but you're looking for something specific. Not a bustling port city, not a place with grand temples or palaces that scream mythological activity ahead. You're looking for quiet, for remote, for the kind of place heroes don't usually frequent because there's no glory in it. As you approach a potential landing site, you observe the shoreline carefully. Are there signs of habitation? Smoke from fires, cultivated fields, the regular passage of boats? You want somewhere that looks forgotten. A quiet cove, a secluded beach backed by hills, a stretch of coastline with dense vegetation. The criteria are simple: maximum peace, minimum people. It's less about strategic importance and more about sheer, unadulterated obscurity. Think of it as searching for the perfect place to disappear off the grid, Bronze Age style. Finally, you identify a spot that seems promising. It's remote, with little sign of human activity nearby. The landing is likely as undignified as the boarding, perhaps wading ashore onto a sandy beach or clambering onto a rocky outcrop. The feel of solid, natural ground under your hooves is reassuring after the uncertain bobbing of the boat. The air here smells different from Crete, a new combination of earth, plants, and salt. You explore cautiously, moving inland a short distance to get a better sense of the area. Is there fresh water, perhaps a stream or spring? Is the vegetation sufficient to provide cover and perhaps sustenance, aside from your more specialized dietary needs? This part of the world, the Aegean and surrounding Mediterranean, was dotted with settlements and potential landing spots. A mainstream historical fact. Ancient Greeks established colonies throughout the Mediterranean and Black Sea regions, often choosing coastal locations that offer good harbors and access to resources. While you're not establishing a colony, you're essentially looking for the opposite, a place they didn't colonize or at least didn't turn into a major center. A quirky tidbit. Ancient maps, to the extent they existed for less prominent areas, would have been rudimentary, focusing on major landmarks and coastlines rather than detailed inland topography. Finding a truly unmapped quiet spot might have been easier then than now. Historians still argue whether certain remote coastal regions were deliberately avoided by ancient settlers or simply offered fewer natural advantages compared to more prominent sites. For you, those fewer advantages are precisely the draw. You found a potential place to stop running, a place where the quiet rhythm of waves and wind might replace the echoing silence of stone and the clamor of unwanted visitors. You've landed, literally and figuratively, in a new, blank chapter, far from the crowded pages of Cretan myth. Stepping onto the shores of this new, quiet place feels like taking your first real breath in years. The air is clean, wild, and smells of things that grow and live, not just stone and damp. The initial disorientation of the open space fades, replaced by the immediate, practical needs of being somewhere completely new and unequipped. You need shelter. You need food. You need to understand this immediate environment to make it work for your desired life of peace and quiet. Your first days are spent exploring cautiously, mapping your immediate surroundings in a way that's entirely different from the labyrinth. This isn't about endless, confusing corridors. It's about hills and valleys, tree lines and coastlines, the location of water sources. You find a stream trickling down from the hills. Its water cool and fresh, a vital discovery. You identify patches of edible plants, berries perhaps, or roots, supplementing your diet with what the land provides. It's a return to basics, a far cry from the curated, if grimly delivered, meals in the labyrinth. Finding shelter is paramount. You can't remain exposed, vulnerable to the elements. A palace was one extreme, a maze another. What you need now is simple, functional, and ideally requires minimal architectural genius. Building something complex is out of the question. You're not deadless. And even if you were, you're trying to avoid complexity. You look for natural options. A sheltered overhang, a small cave nestled in the hillside. Or perhaps you decide construct something basic yourself. Think less grand villa, more really sturdy lean-to. If you opt for construction, it's a matter of using what's available. Fallen branches, large leaves, perhaps some mud or clay to fill gaps. It's rough, ready, and utterly unlabyrinthine. There are no confusing dead ends built in, no unnecessary twists and turns. The entrance is simply the entrance. The walls are made of natural materials that let in air and light, not thick, oppressive stone. It's open, simple, and provides just enough protection from rain or wind. Right? This branch goes here, sort of, and this bit leans like this. Nailed it. Or, tied it with some really strong vines. Same difference. Your construction skills are utilitarian. Focus solely on creating a dry, sheltered spot to rest your head and considerable body mass. Life here is dictated by natural rhythms. The sun tells you when to be active. The chill in the air signals approaching night. You learn the sound of the local wildlife, the patterns of the tides. It's a constant, gentle immersion in the natural world, a stark contrast to the stagnant, artificial environment of the labyrinth. There's a simplicity to it, a focus on immediate needs and the gentle flow of nature. This is your humble hermitage, maze-free and blessedly boring in its straightforwardness. Ancient peoples living in rural or frontier areas often utilize simple dwelling types. A mainstream historical fact. Basic shelters in ancient times included pit houses, partially dug into the ground, simple huts made of wattle and daub, woven branches plastered with mud, and the use of natural caves. Your chosen dwelling, whether found or built, would fit into the spectrum of basic, functional human, or, well, your kind of habitation. Foraging for food was a vital skill for survival in ancient times, supplementing agriculture or herding. A quirky tidbit. Knowledge of local edible plants, seasonal availability, and safe preparation methods were passed down through generations. You, having missed out on traditional upbringing, are learning this crash course style. Rely on instinct and trial and error. Hopefully not too much error. Historians still argue whether certain remote coastal areas in the Aegean remain uninhabited or home to small, transient populations like fishermen or hermits in ancient times. Your presence, regardless, contributes to the fascinating, debated tapestry of ancient land use. Your new life is devoid of grandeur or mythological significance, focusing instead on the simple, quiet business of existing. It's less about being a monster and more about being a particularly large, bull-headed retiree who just wants some peace and quiet and maybe a reliable source of drinking water. This simple dwelling is a foundation of that peaceful plan, a deliberate rejection of the complicated, confining structures of your past. Life in your humble hermitage quickly establishes its own rhythm, one dictated not by palace bells or the panicked screams of lost visitors, but by the gentle, predictable cycles of nature. Waking comes with the dawn, signaled by the gradual lightening of the sky and the chorus of birdsong replacing the silence of night. There are no pressing appointments, no divine curses to worry about before coffee. Not that you have coffee, but you get the idea. Your day is simply there, stretching ahead, waiting to be filled with the quiet business of existing. The first order of business is usually food. Foraging becomes a key part of your routine. You learn which berries are ripe where the best patches of edible greens grow, maybe how to supplement your diet with roots or whatever small creatures you might be able to catch with minimal effort. It's a primal rhythm of searching, gathering, and consuming. If you're near the coast, perhaps you try some very basic fishing, waiting patiently by rock pools, or maybe even waiting out if the water is shallow enough. It's a simple, physical process, far removed from the passive experience of waiting for food to be delivered through a chute in the labyrinth. It connects you to the environment in a tangible way. Ah, excellent. The seasonal grubs are back. Nature's little protein snacks. Beats that dry grain any day. Maintaining your simple shelter takes a small portion of your time. Perhaps a branch has come loose, or a heavy rain has washed away some of the mud plastering. Simple repairs, finding new materials, ensuring your space remains dry and secure. These are your construction projects now, a far cry from the complex, confusing architecture of your past. You're not building a maze, you're fixing a leaky roof. The stakes are significantly lower. Exploration of your immediate territory continues. But it's not a frantic search for an exit. It's a calm, deliberate mapping of your personal space. You learn the best paths through the undergrowth, the sunniest spots for resting, the places with the best views of the sea or the surrounding landscape. This is your world now, limited in scope compared to an entire island or a vast maze, but entirely yours to inhabit peacefully. There are no heroes lurking behind bushes, no panic use to stumble upon. Just you, the plants, and the occasional unbothered wildlife. The vast majority of your time is spent simply being. You rest frequently, enjoying the feeling of the earth beneath you, the warmth of the sun on your hide. You observe the natural world, the clouds drifting overhead, the insects buzzing around flowers, the slow growth of plants. It's a quiet contemplation of the mundane, a stark contrast to the high-stakes drama and existential dread of your former life. Heroic sagas require conflict, grand journeys, and confrontations with monsters. Your retirement involves none of that. Your biggest challenge is probably deciding where to take your afternoon nap. Under the oak tree for shade or on that sunny rock for warmth. Decisions. This is the real adventure now. This kind of self-sufficient, rural existence was common in the ancient world, though often tied to farming or herding on a larger scale. A mainstream historical fact. Outside of the major city-states and agricultural centers, life in ancient times was often more isolated, with people relying directly on the land for survival, growing crops or raising livestock in smaller, more self-sufficient units. Your solitary foraging takes this to an extreme, but the principle of direct reliance on the environment is the same. As for leisure, you're probably inventing your own. Forget the symposia or athletic games of ancient Greece. Your pastimes are simpler. A quirky tidbit. While we know about organized entertainment, less is known about how ordinary ancient people in remote areas simply passed the time alone. Perhaps they carved wood, played simple games with stones, or simply enjoyed storytelling. Even if you only have yourself to tell stories to. For you, maybe it's perfecting the art of finding the most comfortable napping spot, or perhaps trying to communicate with the local bird population. Results likely vary. Historians still argue whether isolated pockets of habitation in ancient times maintained complex social structures or lived more solitary, independent lives. Your existence leans heavily toward the latter, a deliberate choice for peace over community. Your daily rhythm is one of simple survival and quiet contentment, a life far removed from the expectations placed upon a creature like you by myth and legend. It's a surprising peace you sought, found in the mundane realities of retirement. The quiet rhythm of your retired life unfolds day after day, a tapestry woven from simple tasks, natural sounds, and long, uninterrupted naps. The sun warms your hide, the rain cools the air, and the wind whispers through the trees. You found a certain contentment in this basic existence, a peace that the stone halls of the labyrinth could never offer. This remote stretch of coastline and hillside is your sanctuary, a place where the biggest drama is whether the berry patch is ripe or if you can finally perfect that technique for catching particularly nimble fish. However, even in a seemingly secluded spot, complete isolation is difficult to maintain forever. This land, like most accessible areas in the ancient world, is likely used by humans in some capacity, even if infrequently. Local fishermen might ply the nearby waters, shepherds might graze their flocks on higher slopes, or foragers might venture into the woods searching for herbs or firewood. You are aware of their presence not through direct interaction at first, but through subtle signs, a faint trail through the undergrowth that isn't made by animals, the distant bleating of sheep on hillsides, the smell of wood smoke carried on the wind, or the sound of oars dipping into the water from a boat just offshore. When you do become aware of them, your instinct is not confrontation. That life is behind you. Your primary goal now is peaceful coexistence, which, for you, means avoiding contact entirely. You become very good at being unseen. You learn to recognize the sounds and signs of human approach and quietly melt into the landscape, finding cover amongst dense bushes, retreating into your simple shelter, or simply staying perfectly still and letting them pass by. It's less about fear and more about a strong preference for uninterrupted solitude. You didn't leave the labyrinth to start causing trouble, you left to avoid it. Oh, look, humans. Best just be a tree for a few minutes. They never noticed the really big, bull-headed trees. On rare occasions, a quiet encounter might be unavoidable. Perhaps a fisherman lands his boat too close to your hidden cove, or a shepherd wanders further down the slope than usual. In these moments, you might be seen, a fleeting glimpse of a large, unusual shape disappearing into the foliage, a shadow moving just at the edge of their vision. Their reaction is likely one of startled confusion, perhaps quickly followed by a hasty retreat. And that's precisely the interaction you prefer. No screaming, no drawing of weapons, just a mutual, quiet acknowledgement of your presence and a swift, peaceful disengagement. Your retirement plan relies heavily on humans being easily startled and having a healthy respect for things they don't understand. These quiet, almost non-interactions are a world away from the forest, terrifying encounters of the labyrinth. There, your presence was a known, inescapable horror. Here, you are a fleeting mystery, a folktale making whisper about around village fires. Did you see that strange shadow by the old cove? Looked like, well, couldn't say for sure, but it was big. You actively choose not to fulfill the monster role. Your power is used not for intimidation or conflict, but for the subtle art of remaining undetected and enjoying your nap schedule. Ancient rural communities often had a deep connection to their local landscape and its less understood inhabitants. A mainstream historical fact. Ancient Greeks populated their natural world with various spirits and minor deities associated with specific places, nymphs of springs and trees, satyrs in the woods, and local protective spirits. While you're not a nymph clearly, your unseen or rarely seen presence in a remote spot could easily feed into local folklore, becoming part of the region's mysterious charm rather than a clear and present danger. Knowledge of the wilderness and its potential inhabitants both real and imagined, was part of the fabric of ancient life outside the cities. A quirky tidbit. Local folklore in ancient Greece was rich with stories of strange creatures and encounters in remote areas, often serving to explain unusual events or features of the landscape, or simply as cautionary tales. Historians still argue whether much of this local folklore had roots in actual, albeit perhaps misinterpreted, encounters with unusual animals or individuals living on the fringes of society, or if it was purely imaginative. Your quiet existence provides a unique, albeit fictionalized, perspective on how a real creature myth could have become part of such whispered legends, preferring restful anonymity over terrifying fame. Your priority isn't to scare people. It's to ensure they leave you alone so you can get back to enjoying the peace and quiet of your unexpectedly tranquil retirement. The quiet years stretch into decades, a gentle, unhurried flow of seasons marked by the changes in foliage, the temperature of the air, the bounty or scarcity of wild foods. Your retirement isn't measured in thrilling events, but in sunrises and sunsets, the sound of rain on your simple roof and the steady, comforting presence of the natural world around you. Those occasional glimpses of human neighbors continue, always brief, always ending in their quiet retreat, reinforcing your status as a part of the landscape's mystery rather than a threat. You perfected the art of being a background character in their lives, and they, in turn, grant you the peace of being undisturbed in yours. Your body ages, as all bodies do, mythical or otherwise. Your movements might become a little slower, a little more deliberate. Your hide perhaps grows thicker. Your horns a little worn from years of accidental bumps against trees or rocks. But this aging isn't decline towards a dramatic end. It's a softening, a settling into the land. The aches you feel are from sleeping on slightly too hard ground, not from battle wounds. The weariness is from the simple effort of foraging, not from the stress of constant confinement or confrontation. It's a natural aging process, surprisingly mundane for a creature legend, a mainstream historical fact. In the ancient world, average life expectancy was significantly lower than today, often due to disease, childbirth, and injury, though individuals who survived childhood could live into old age, sometimes even achieving significant years if conditions were favorable and they avoided major illness or conflict. Your mythical constitution probably gives you a leg up here, allowing for a longer, more peaceful decline than most humans of the era. The labyrinth, the tributes, the heroes, they fade into a distant, almost unbelievable memory. It's like a strange, stressful dream you once had. Your reality is now defined by the simple pleasures. The warmth of the sunny rock to nap on, the taste of sweet berries after a long search, the feeling of cool water from the stream, the perfect angle to get a good scratch against a sturdy tree. There are no prophecies to fulfill, no destinies to meet, just the quiet business of being a large, bull-headed individual enjoying his golden years by the sea. Ah, yes, this is the life. Much better than waiting in a maze for someone to try and stab you. Highly recommend retirement. You find joy in the small things. Watching a bird build its nest, feeling the change in the wind before a storm, the simple satisfaction of a full belly after a successful day of foraging. The absence of fear is a constant, quiet blessing. You're not afraid of getting lost. You know your immediate territory well enough now. You're not afraid of confinement. Your home has an open door. And you're not afraid of unexpected visitors. You're good at hiding and they tend to leave anyway. The world outside your immediate, peaceful bubble might still be full of drama and conflict, but it rarely intrudes here. Your internal landscape has changed too. The confusion and isolation of your youth, the dull monotony of the labyrinth, the shock of the encounter, they've all softened with time and peace. You've found a sort of acceptance, a contentment in being exactly what you are, away from the expectations and narratives placed upon you by others. You are not the monster in the maze anymore. You are simply you, living a quiet life. Historians still argue whether ancient concepts of a peaceful afterlife or final rest involved a literal location, or more metaphorical states of being. For you, peace is not an afterlife. It's this life, found unexpectedly in a remote coastal hermitage. Perhaps you develop little routines beyond foraging and napping. Watching the sun set over the sea becomes a ritual, a silent acknowledgement of the day's end and the promise of another quiet morning. You might find a favorite spot with a view, spending hours simply observing the play of light on the water, the distant shapes of clouds. Your thoughts, if a minotaur can be said to have complex thoughts, are likely simple, focus on the immediate present, on the feeling of peace. A quirky tidbit. While ancient Greek mythology is full of dramatic deaths, some traditions did a concept of heroes or individuals achieving a form of blessed, peaceful existence in places like the Elysian Fields. Your self-directed, decidedly non-heroic peaceful ending is a unique counterpoint to those tales. Historians still argue whether the idea of a restful final period of life was a widespread belief among ordinary ancient people or primarily a concept associated with elite or philosophical groups. For you, it's a lived reality, a surprisingly simple truth found after a life of mythological complexity. And so, the years continue to pass in this tranquil state. The world outside moves on, empires rise and fall, new myths are born, but none of it touches your quiet corner of the coast. You are the minotaur who retired, the creature of legend who opted for naps over notoriety, for foraging over fighting. Your story didn't end in a climactic battle, but in the quiet, uneventful comfort of well-earned peace. It's a testament to the fact that even the most fearsome figures of myth might, prefer a comfortable retirement to an epic ending. You live out your sunset years in surprising comfort and uneventful calm, proving that sometimes the most legendary thing you can do is simply find peace. Now, let's gently bring the story to a close. Feel yourself drifting, the images of ancient shores and quiet hermitages softening at the edges. The sound of the sea and the wind begin to fade, becoming one with the gentle hum of your room, the rhythm of your own quiet breathing. The story of the minotaur who found peace, a tale less of monstrous deeds and more of simple existence, is now complete. Allow the details to recede, the sharp edges blurring into softness. The labyrinth, the heroes, the quiet coast, they're all just whispers on the edge of sleep now. There's only the present moment, the comfort of your space, the growing heaviness of your eyelids. Drift into the stillness that follows the story's end. There is nothing more to hear, nothing more to do. Just quiet, just rest. The myths are asleep, and so are you.